It's lovely to see so many people here, and I'm sure that number will go up as well as we're talking this afternoon. Thank you for considering applying to Lancaster. We really hope this afternoon that we can share lots of information with you about our programme and hopefully have some time at the end to answer any questions that you might have as well about applying to us, or what life might be like if you do choose to be part of the Lancaster DClinPsy. Okay, so I should probably introduce myself. My name is Stacey. I'm a clinical tutor on the Lancaster programme, and I'm also involved in the selections and admissions team. So I'm going to start us off today, but then I'm also joined by lots of other speakers this afternoon. So we've got some tutors here who are going to share a little bit about their paths into clinical training. We've got some trainees who are obviously here as well, and they're going to share a little bit about their experiences. We've got Claire and Marissa who are going to talk about the part-time pathway. Rob, who's going to share some information about selections. And we've got some members of Lupin, Karen and Patricia. That's our public involvement network, and they're going to talk a little bit about what qualities they would hope to see in a clinical psychologist. So hopefully we've got lots of time to kind of introduce you to our programme. And as I say, we'll have some time for questions at the end as well. We are keeping to quite a tight schedule, so the speakers only have around 5 minutes each. So I'm just going to ask, if you've got questions, if you can just save them up to the end, and we'll make sure we've got a good 20 minutes where you can pop questions in the chat or turn your camera on, whatever you prefer, because it just might be that we answer the questions as we go through today. So hopefully that sounds okay to everyone. Okay, so I'm just going to start off, I guess, by giving you a little bit of information about our programme and helping you to understand a little bit more about what life might be like if you choose to apply to Lancaster. And then I'm going to hand over to Rob to tell you a bit more about the selections and admissions process. So in terms of our programme, inclusivity is really important to us. We have a programme that's based on a set of values, and inclusivity is at the heart of all of the work that we are trying to do here. So we're very proud of the fact that we were the first programme to have a part-time route. And Claire and Marissa will tell you lots about that, what that looks like, and their experiences of it in a little while. We also really want to make it possible for people to apply to clinical psychology and to have different routes into training. So widening participation is a key part of our agenda, and we hope that our selections process reflects that. And Rob's going to tell you a little bit more about that in a while. As a programme, we also make sure that we've got a broad range of stakeholders integrated into our programme. So any changes, any developments, any ongoing work that we're doing, we're influenced by a broad range of people. So yeah, there's lots of things kind of going on, and if you're a trainee here, you'd have the opportunity to get involved in lots of programme developments. So it's really difficult to capture quickly, I guess, what life is like being a trainee in Lancaster. But I'll tell you a little bit about the course and how it's set up, and I guess what you could expect if you choose to apply to our programme. So I guess on the full-time pathway, typically you would be in placement for 3 days a week. You would have 1 day, which is a learning day at the university, and 1 study day per week. That's kind of the setup for the typical full-time trainees that we have. We also have a part-time pathway, and that looks slightly different, but I'll leave that for now because Claire will be able to give you a bit more information about that in a while. One of the questions we often get asked is around placement. So where would my placement be? Where am I best living? So we'll try and give you a bit of information about that and what placements are available. We have quite a big geographical area that we cover, and so when we're organising our placements, we do that in liaison with the other two Northwest programmes, so with Liverpool and Manchester, and we sort of make sure that people have the ability to have placements, I guess, across our patch. In terms of the placements that we offer, we have 3 clinical placements that you do throughout training. One is a direct skills placement, so that's around working clinically, using your therapy skills with people. An indirect placement, which is around working with teams and doing things like supervision and consultation. And then in 3rd year, the clinical placement has all of the other things and a leadership focus as well. So the idea is that you get the opportunity on that placement to do some leadership work and think about things like service development. We also have a community placement, which you do at the start of the 3rd year, but that's a very short placement. So placements really are the 3 direct, indirect, and leadership clinical placements. In terms of where they are, our placements are allocated across the Northwest region. And so there's lots of sort of areas that we cover. They might be located in Lancashire, in Cheshire, in Greater Manchester, Merseyside or Cumbria. So we have a massive geographical area. And one of the questions we often get asked is, you know, can I guarantee that my placement will be close to where I live? And that's a really difficult question to answer. So when we're allocating placements, we do take geography into account and we try our best to allocate people close to where they live. But the allocation is made, I guess, based on learning needs. They take the priority. And so we can't kind of guarantee that a placement will be in a specific location. In terms of driving, you can do our programme without having a driving licence. That's absolutely fine, and we have many trainees who do that. But you do need to be prepared to do a little bit of travelling, just because we can't guarantee for sure exactly where you'll be placed. So that's kind of a little bit of a quick summary of our 3 placements. But again, if you have more questions about those, then we can try to answer some of those questions at the end. In terms of research, we are, as a programme, we are located within the Division of Health Research. We have a research team here who are brilliant, and I think Daniela's with us today. She will be able to share a little bit about her experience of being part of the research team. The research team here, I guess, supervise lots of research, obviously, and will get involved in the supervision of your thesis. So when trainees join on the programme, they're allocated a clinical tutor and a research tutor, and the research tutor will support you with all of your research needs and helping you with your thesis work. Our research staff have got, I guess, clinical specialisms, areas that they are particularly interested in and have done research in before. And we also often work closely with our colleagues from the Division of Health Research as well. So sometimes staff from other areas in the university will come and support some of our theses as well. Trainees are encouraged to publish their thesis work, and we're really lucky to say that we have quite high levels of publication from our trainees. So yeah, it's something, again, that we're very proud of. In terms of learning, so our learning days are 1 day per week, so there will be 1 day a week where you are expected to come to the Health Innovation Campus, which is where we're based, for a learning session. The only exception to that is in our induction block, which happens between September and December of the 1st year. That's where I guess we tend to have quite a lot of focus learning in those first few months before you start on your clinical placement. And typically you'll be here 3 to 4 days a week in the induction block, alongside kind of completing other activities that we have going on in those first few weeks. Learning is facilitated by different people. So we have some internal staff. We all have sessions that we facilitate, but we also have lots of external learning facilitators who are specialists working in their area. They will come in to deliver different sessions for us. The learning takes place, I guess, quite often in a large learning group, but sometimes we do small group work as well. It just depends on what the session is and what works best for that particular topic. In terms of our programme, we are accredited as a face-to-face programme. So the majority of the learning that takes place happens on site. We do have some sessions that are delivered online, but we make a decision on that based on, I guess, what provides the best learning experience for trainees. So as a general rule, I would expect that if you're applying to our programme that you would be coming into the Health Innovation Campus 1 day per week to take part in a learning session. In terms of assessment, we don't have any written exams, which I think is good news for some people and not others. Everyone has a different relationship with doing exams, don't they? So we don't have anything written like that. We do continuous assessment by coursework, and there's a variety of different assessments that you complete throughout clinical training. Some of those have a clinical focus, and some of them are more research related. But the idea is that you're developing lots of different competencies that you will then use in your clinical practice. You will also obviously complete a doctoral thesis, and that's something that you work towards throughout the 3 years of you being here. So yeah, that's our assessments. I think because we've only got such a short space of time, it's difficult to give you lots more information than that. But what I would say is those are sort of the main headlines in terms of the different areas of our programme. We've got a really comprehensive website, and there's something called the handbook on there. So if you go and have a look on there, you should be able to find more information about placements, about research, about the assessments that we do. Yeah, and hopefully that will answer some of your questions. But if anyone's got any specific questions, just hold on to them for now, and we will answer them at the end, hopefully. Okay. So I'm going to hand over to Rob, I think, next, if that's okay. Rob's going to tell you a little bit more about our selections and admissions process. Thank
you. Yeah, feel free to have a route through our handbook. It is a rabbit hole, though. It's immense, but you'll lose yourself in it. Super. Okay, so this is a very brief run over our process for selection submissions in 2025. There are a few changes from the stuff we've done last year. So if you have been to one of these events before or applied to us before, there's 1 or 2 small changes. Hopefully it'll be useful for people who haven't seen it before. Slight Japanese theme going on. It doesn't mean anything. There's no hidden message there. So there are 4 fundamental steps to getting onto our programme, joining us as a trainee. I'll run briefly through each one, giving you a very sort of quick things that you need to remember. But fundamentally, you need to put an application through the clearinghouse. We will do a screening test with anyone who meets our minimum criteria, which is just eligibility for GBC with a big PS. Then if you are in the top roughly 200 people, we'll invite you along to an interview here at Lancaster, which I'll go into a bit more detail on. And then the 52 commissions, the 52 people that get an offer, will do a retake of that online deductive reasoning test on the internet using Teams with me. And then those 52 people join us on the 1st of September each year. Okay. So the application form. The one thing you need to take from this is we're not going to read your application form. I say this every year and people still don't believe it. Literally don't look at the application form. I will download a spreadsheet of people's contact details from it, but we really don't look at it. And I say that because people do assume that we do look at it and we will know things about you as a result. We don't. All we know is your email address and your name. So if there's stuff you're putting into your application form and you think that your panel is going to know it, they won't. I won't know it. We don't know about disabilities that you put in there. We don't know about your history. We don't know where you've been employed. We don't know what your qualifications are. So you need to tell us about yourself when you come. So why don't we read it? There is no evidence that application forms predict performance in this role or many others. And also the stuff that the application does ask about is really heavily influenced by socioeconomic status. So people going off and getting qualifications, access to university, incredibly influenced by that status. We want to move away from that, which is why we use that screening test, which I'll come to in a minute. That does mean that if you're only applying to Lancaster, as some people do, you don't need to fill in the vast majority of that application form. I'm aware that some of the fields do require to put something in. So if you're only applying to us, you can just put NA into stuff where it's asking you for lots of text. Obviously, if you're applying to other programs, they're going to want to read all that. So do go ahead and fill it in for somebody else. Because we're not interested in your previous qualifications or what you scored or any of your transcripts, we can't provide any advice as to what would make your application better because we're not going to read your application. It's a question that I get on email quite a lot. My usual response is do something that you're going to enjoy. But yeah, we can't make your application better. So we get all of those applications in by the end of January, 31st of January, we'll have that big list. As soon as I've got that, I filter out the few people who have applied without eligibility for GBC, and the roughly 750 people that are left will get an invitation to do the deductive reasoning test. Okay, we are doing that test with Manchester and Sheffield this year, the other two programs. So if you've applied to one of those programs as well as us, you will be asked to do it once, not more than once. And that score will go to all of the places that you've applied to. If you do have a disability, you need extra time, you'll be asked to get in touch with myself here and I'll apply that extra time. It will be the same for all those programs. Okay. Key thing to remember for this test is it feels really hard for everybody. It's supposed to be really hard. That's how we get a discrimination in the group of people. And obviously, where you score in that group of people changes every year because it's a different cohort of people. These are the questions I always get about it. So one of the complaints is that it doesn't represent what a clinical psychologist does, which is kind of true, although a lot of the questions in it are about let's schedule meetings in, which you spend an awful lot of time doing as a clinical psychologist or just in job. What it does do is assess your cognitive flexibility. So it's about how you're going to reason, and there are direct relationships from that to your academic potential. So that's what we're really trying to measure, is what academic potential do you have? We want to take the best people to come and join us and do the doctorate. So we're saying, how are you going to perform in an academic environment without looking at previous academic ability, to take away that socioeconomic influence. In terms of support for disabilities, we follow the BPS guidelines on this. This test has been done literally millions of times worldwide. So we've got a really good baseline as to what needs to happen in terms of support for people with disabilities. And we know from our own data, because we've been using it for 6 or 7 years now, that what we do in terms of support is providing a good level for people. We're getting the same number of people, in fact, slightly more people through who declare a disability from before the screening test to after. So we know it's working and we can put that in place for you. You just need to get in touch with us, drop us an email, including your clearinghouse ID so that I know who you are, and give me any evidence and any information about what extra time you might need. Okay. As I mentioned, because it's really hard, we get a really nice statistical normal distribution of people generally. So people don't all score the same. Everybody gets a different test, but the questions are baselined. So you'll get very different questions every time you do it. but because they know what level those questions are at, it gets you to the same sort of scoring position at the end. You can get questions wrong and still score in the 99th percentile. So don't be worried about, oh, I must spend a lot of time on a question. Don't get stuck if you're doing this test. Work your way through it. Try and get through all the questions. Do your best. That's all I can say in terms of advice for it. So we give a 2-week window to do that test. At the end of the 2 weeks, I give the scores to the various programs, and we'll get in touch with the top 178 people. I'm guessing what that number is. And we'll invite you to interview. The dates are on our website. I don't remember them off the top of my head. In terms of the interview, it's very similar to last year. We've tweaked it a bit. Again, I'll come to that in a second. But the key thing to remember is the same, and that's to come here and be yourself. We want people to come and show themselves to us and relax and not try and show us something that isn't themselves. You're not here to sell, you're here to show potential, and that's about who you are. Yeah, really engaging with the panels. The tasks that we're going to ask you to do again are listed on our website. They're very briefly listed there. So the key change that we've made for this year is that we've put a group task in at the start. So you will work with 3 other candidates and expert by experience. Just doing a communication task that will be observed, and the way that you communicate and work together will be rated. Then you'll go into a panel interview, as we've done previously, where there'll be some questions, a role play, which I spelled wrong, and then a video discussion task where you'll watch a video and talk about the reflections on what you've seen and the interactions in that video. Okay. All of those things you'll notice in my text there about reflection. So we're looking for lots of reflection to see you and how you feel about the things that are going on. My advice on this is, as I say, to be you. Pre-scripted answers don't really do a great job in the way that we interview, because we are looking for the individual to engage with us at panel and to listen to the questions. So do try and come and express yourself rather than express what's on a piece of paper. You're more than welcome to come and write down questions, take notes, if that helps you, but you do need to be yourself with us. We're a slightly different approach to interviewing than other places. There is currently a discussion nationwide about dress code in interviews. It's a job interview, so I had a load of queries about this last year. Please wear what you want for a job interview. If your hair is green, you don't need to dye it black. Please come along and be yourself, and don't be scared of us. I spend a nice lot of time walking up and down this corridor here with people, trying to get them to relax and chat to me before they go into interview. We're all dead friendly, and we want to hear from you and you to relax and be your best self. So yeah, please come and enjoy it. We have a great time chatting to people, so we want people to have a good time while they're here. If you do get an offer, one of those 52 people, then I will get you to schedule a retest with me. So I'll ask you to spend half an hour-ish doing that test again. It's kind of the easiest bit because you'll have already done the test and done incredibly well to get a place at interview. We don't look for exactly the same score. We know it feels more difficult second time round. You get to choose the date and time within the range that I'm available. As long as people take it seriously and don't think, oh, it'll be fine, I won't bother, and I'll go out the night before, everybody's fine. Yeah, so it's not something to worry about, but it is. You need to be aware that it's going to happen if you do get an offer, and that you will need to take it seriously. Final few things. As Stacey already mentioned, you don't need a driving licence. Our contracts, so you'll start your contract with the local trust, LSCFT, on the 1st of September. If that is a weekday, then that would be your first day here in teaching, even if it's a Friday. And ultimately, I think throughout the whole process, and once you're here as a trainee as well, you need to remember that you're applying for a job. This is a job. It's a weird situation being here as a trainee at a university. but also having those requirements of being an employee. But I think if everybody holds in mind that, yeah, I'm here being paid to learn, then expectations and your own well-being as well are kind of well supported. Okay. I think we're moving on to Claire to talk about part-time stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Stacey. Yeah, just bear with me while I get my slides up. I'm Claire Dixon. I'm one of the clinical tutors on the programme. I'm going to say a little bit today about our part-time route, and you're going to hear a bit later on, excuse me, from Marissa, who's one of our part-time trainees. Okay, so hopefully you can see these slides now. Okay, so as Stacey said, we are very proud of our part-time route in training. We were, I think, the first programme to offer an accredited part-time route. I believe there may be a few others now. But yeah, our first official part-time trainees, they started in September 2020. There were 2 of them, and they are currently due to qualify at the end of this December. Previous to that, we did have a lot of trainees on what we used to sort of call a bespoke route. So we were wanting, obviously, in terms of the Equality Act, we wanted to be inclusive, we wanted to be able to be responsive to flexible working requests as an employer. So we often would offer more bespoke routes. So for people who maybe had been on maternity leave or struggled with some health difficulties and wanted to come back into a different sort of route of training to manage those things outside of training. But that became quite unwieldy and very variable. So in order to actually make it more contained and easier for everybody to manage, we decided we would offer an official part-time route, which is 0.7 whole-time equivalent, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. Yeah, so the rationale for this really is that we obviously wanted to be able to widen participation into the clinical psychology profession because it isn't very diverse, and we wanted to, it fits with our inclusivity agenda essentially. So we wanted to be able to make sure that training to be a clinical psychologist was accessible and available to people who wouldn't be able to manage a full-time route or didn't want to commit to a full-time route for whatever reason. So those reasons could be that people have a physical or mental health difficulty, they could have caring responsibilities, or they could prefer to have a sort of work-life balance that meant that they chose to do training in a slightly different way. So that's the sort of background to why we have a part-time route in training. Just a bit of practicalities. So as I said, it's a 0.7 whole-time equivalent. So it works out at 3.5 days, which is 26.25 hours per week. And the training route part-time takes 4 years, 4 months compared to the full-time route of 3 years. We do have a little bit of flexibility within that part-time approach as well on some days of the week. So some trainees have choose to operationalise their hours a week over a fortnight. So they might work 3 days one week and 4 days the next, for example, while some might do 3.5 days each week. That is something more possible with maybe placement related days, because you can negotiate that with your supervisors and on a study day. However, when it comes to a learning day, those are fixed hours. So we do have those days, as Stacey said, in Lancaster. They start currently at 9:30 and they finish at 4:30. So there's less flexibility in terms of the hours that you work within those teaching days, those learning days. Our selections process is absolutely the same for both routes, so exactly what Rob has just said. You choose either the full-time or the part-time route on the clearinghouse application. You can't say you want to apply for both. That's because we don't sort of do a separate selections process. So you have the same chance whether you apply, the same route to being offered a place, whichever route you choose, really. So we don't look at whether you've chosen for part-time or full-time until we are ready to fill our commission places. And currently the programme offers up to 25% of our commissions as part-time places, if we have those people who are falling in that top ratio that Rob mentioned before. So similarly to what Stacey said, there are no exams and trainees are provided with the same amount of study time to complete their assessments regardless of route. So we want to make this equitable, whether you're doing full-time or part-time. So typically trainees on the part-time route would have half a day of study time per week compared to a full day, but obviously they're doing training over a longer period of time, and their assessment deadlines will be placed at appropriate points within their training. So we know that their learning and development is at a comparable stage to the people who are submitting assignments on the full-time route. For learning, the curriculum is equivalent as well. Part-time trainees attend the same learning sessions as full-time trainees, although the difference is that obviously because they're here for longer periods of time, they'll do that with different cohorts. So they'll start with their initial cohort that they were recruited with, and then they will join the cohort who joins the year after them for some. So it's spread out over a greater time period. But essentially what they will receive in terms of the curriculum will be equivalent. Placements, again, the number of placement days will be equivalent across training, whether you're full-time or part-time. However, for part-time trainees, the placements are sort of longer and thinner. So you might spend, rather than 3 days on placement, more likely to be 2 days on placement, and your placements, the duration's likely to be sort of between 11 and 13 months, rather than 9 months for full-time trainees. And again, as Stacey said, the practice-based learning that we offer in placements, that covers the coverage of the lifespan and the competency framework across those 3 areas of direct, indirect, and leadership and influencing competencies. So what it looks like, practically this is in a typical week, so things do shift and change a little bit, but on a typical week, if you're on the part-time route, you'd be doing 2 days a week on placement, 1 day of learning in Lancaster and a half a day of study. I think we'll be sharing these slides, so there is a link, but as Stacey and Robert said, in our handbook, if you searched for the structure of training, you would be able to see how the part-time route compares to the full-time route by either clicking that link or searching within our handbook. So yeah, please save up your questions for later, but I've put my email address on there. So if anybody had any specific questions relating to the part-time route that we don't get to today, or you want to ask separately from today, please do email me. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. That's really helpful. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Helen, who's a tutor on the programme and is going to talk about her path into clinical training. Helen's here. She.
There we are.
Yes, thank you.
Hi. Can I just check? Is Danielle still with us? Because I think
I am. Yes.
Do you want to go first? Because I know you're on a tighter time than me.
Yes, yeah. we just swapped places by email, if that's okay. So hi everybody, I'm Daniela Basilio. I'm a lecturer in clinical psychology in Lancaster and a research tutor on the course. I'm also a clinical psychologist, and I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking about my journey in psychology and what I do in Lancaster with our trainees. So my journey with psychology starts in Italy, where I'm from. I completed my BSc and MSc, and then I trained clinically as a clinical psychologist and as a CBT practitioner. Then in 2014, which is sounds like a long time ago, I arrived to the UK to complete a PhD in Manchester. So that was a classic PhD by research, and that's how I tried. That's the start of my attempt to build a bridge between clinical practice and research in psychology. So then fast forward 10 years, I've been obviously teaching and helping students in Manchester and in Lancaster now to do high quality research in psychology. So fast forward 10 years, I'm here in Lancaster helping trainees to really try and change things via research in psychology. So trainees do projects that have strong clinical links with practice. So they use research to really try and create that transaction between clinical and the clinical world and research and vice versa. So the idea is to translate results into clinical practice, and I'm lucky to have been helping trainees and my supervisees for 9 months now in Lancaster, with a wide range of studies, really, from access to healthcare in people experiencing suicide and self-harm, to the experiences of mania and psychosis in mothers and people in the perinatal period. So there is a wide range of interests that my supervisees show in really create that bridge between clinical practice and research. Personally, my research interests are digital innovation in mental health. So what I have been trying to do increasingly over the past couple of years is to try and create, together with colleagues and trainees, new ways to digitalize services in mental health. And I do this clinically as well. I see patients online using different tools. We're trying to use chatbots now and see how that goes. So if our path will cross, then hopefully I can get to talk a little bit more about digital innovation in mental health, and ways to increase digital usage and the kind of the applicability of digital innovation in mental health. So that was me. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniela. Okay, Helen.
Hi, yeah, so I'm Helen and I'm one of the clinical tutors on the programme, and my journey into clinical psychology started at Lancaster, actually, doing my undergrad degree, sort of 20 years ago, and following my undergrad, I spent some time, almost 5 years, I suppose, gathering some clinical experience, working as a support worker within inpatient services, in mental health services, substance misuse service, some neuro services as well, sort of in as support worker and as assistant psychologist, just to really get that good grounding and actually just to decide, is this the route I want to take, you know? And I think for me, one of the things that really attracted me to Lancaster was its clear values around inclusivity, and for me, sort of the importance of not being judged on socioeconomic background, but actually on your clinical and academic potential, because I would fall into that category of not typically a socioeconomic background, and have opportunities. For me, doing a master's wasn't an option financially, so I think that's what I was really drawn back to Lancaster for as well, in terms of knowing that it was a really inclusive course for trainees and that it promoted that. I guess the trainees, on qualifying, is we take that out with us into clinical practice. So I trained in 2009 till 2012 here at Lancaster and did my research thesis on Parkinson's disease. And we did a range of placements at that time, again, sort of arranging across the lifespan, and had some great supervisors, some great placement experiences, some real challenging ones too. But they're the ones you remember as well. And really, when I was training, my clinical passion and focus was working with older adults. And again, at Lancaster, I suppose, being encouraged and invited to think about ways in which we can make services and therapeutic options accessible to people, for example, where there may be ageist barriers or disability barriers, again, really appealed to me. And that was something that I could take forth as after qualifying from Lancaster as well. So I worked sort of clinical practice for 12 years, working with older adults, and then rejoined the programme here as tutor, which felt lovely and very full circle to be back. And again, just to be within an environment where it's very growth focused, very individualised for both staff and trainees. And yeah, just sort of really varied. I always liked my life as a trainee, where you would be some days on placement and some days doing research. So I think it serves you well if you like the variety and the flexibility, and the demands that can come with that, I guess. So now I spend my time supporting trainees through their training journey. Again, unsurprisingly, my focus tends to be more on the clinical side, with sort of placements and supervision and supporting supervisors, but also involved with teaching and lots of aspects of the programme. And that's me.
Thank you, Helen. That's really good. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so we're going to hand over now to some of our trainees who are going to talk a little bit about their paths into training as well. So I don't know if there's a particular order. I've got Jem first. I don't know if Jem's here.
I'm here.
Yeah, are you all right to go first?
Yeah, of course, yeah. I'm sat slightly in the dark, so apologies for that. But yeah, so my name's Jem. I'm in my final year of the training at Lancaster. I didn't go down a traditional route to get into clinical psychology. So I was initially an actress and a professional dancer. And then I went into mental health nursing. So I worked as a mental health nurse for 12 years. Um, and I think I just found that when I was working as a mental health nurse, there was just something missing from my practice. There was just something that it just kind of, I just didn't feel satisfied with what I was doing. And I remember doing some research, and Lancaster University came up, and it was detailing all the opportunities and training that you get during the course. And I remember thinking, oh, I wish that I would be able to do that. But I just felt that there was no way that I'd be able to do it, because I think I had in my mind this perception of what a clinical psychologist would look like. And clinical psychologists have all their ducks in a row. And, I'm just not that person. I'm quite just not what I would envisage a clinical psychologist to be like. And I ended up, so I was working in CAMS, and I was working as a team leader, and I just really didn't enjoy my job at all. Um, and I now feel grateful for that experience, because that kind of gave me the kick that I needed to look into actually what do I want to do. And I decided that clinical psychology was something that I wanted to give it a try. So I did a conversion course. It was a master's, it was a 12-month thing. And it was a really difficult time. I took a week off to do one of my assignments, and I broke my back. So, like, to say I was a ballerina, I'm incredibly clumsy. So I did half of my master's horizontal. And it came round to applying that year, and I only wanted to go to Lancaster. Mostly because of the values, like reading about the values that Lancaster hold, and the different opportunities that you get in terms of Lancaster. There was lots of systemic opportunities and things like that. And the values about inclusivity and accepting you as who you are. So I applied, and I was kind of thinking, oh, I'm not gonna get an interview. These deductive reasoning tests are gonna send me wild, honestly. But I did. I got that interview. And I think for me, I remember emailing Rob 3 times when I was applying, saying, can I please just double check that you don't read our applications? And Rob was like, we definitely don't read your application. I was like, right, okay. I'm really sorry. Can I please just double check that you don't read my application? Because if you don't, I'm not going to fill it in. I'm only applying to Lancaster. And he was like, honestly, we are not going to read your application. I was like, okay. I'm really, really sorry. Can you please just tell me one more time? So I only applied to Lancaster. They didn't read my application because I didn't do one. I didn't do like a personal statement or anything. And I can honestly say it was such a lovely experience of the interview, because it was all about it was about who I am as a person and who I want to be as a clinical psychologist. I didn't feel like I needed to know absolutely everything in the entire world, because I felt like they were trying to see who I was instead. So I actually really enjoyed the interview, and I was offered a place, and even I think it was, I started in the September, and in the December I was still waiting for an email from Rob to say, really sorry, we actually invited the wrong person to a place on the course. But it's just, I've genuinely loved every second of the course. You get so many experiences, you get so much supervision. My placements have been absolutely incredible. And I think there was one placement, so I've worked in an adult CMHT before, and that was my first placement, but it was such a different experience being there as a trainee clinical psychologist than as a mental health nurse. So I feel like I've just been able to learn absolutely loads. I've definitely made some really, really good friendships that I feel are lifelong friendships. I don't know whether they're aware of that, but they are kind of stuck with me for life now. I just feel like I've found my tribe, and it doesn't feel like I'm getting up and going to work, but I am, and I love it. And I'm so glad I took that chance, even though I thought that it wasn't ever going to be something that's for me. Um, I'm part of the trainee council now as well. So we've recently started a trainee council that we work alongside staff, and we look at all the excellent things that are in place and how we can grow that even further. And Lancaster's definitely a university that's constantly evolving and growing, and it's great. Staff are absolutely lovely. Yeah, and yeah, everyone's just so genuine. I also have a disability, which has deteriorated quite a lot since being on the course, not related to the course. But without the support of of staff, I wouldn't have been able to get through this course. There's been reasonable adjustments that are beyond what I could ever have asked for. Um, Staff have made it so that I can continue on the course, and there were times where I really didn't think I was going to be able to. Um, yeah, I do not have a bad word to say about the course, and that's really genuine. Um, so yeah, that's me. I don't know if I've rambled a bit, probably have. I do a lot. But I'm also going to pop my email address in the chat. So if anyone has got any questions or you want to reach out at all, then please do just get in touch. I'm happy to support or answer any questions.
Thank you, Jem. Thanks for sharing your experiences with us as well. It's really helpful. Thank you. Okay, can I hand to Hannah next? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
So I'm also in my final year of training, which feels a bit wild to be saying, but there we go. And I guess my journey into the course was kind of slightly more traditional. So I did psychology at undergrad. Then I went on to do a volunteer assistant position, followed by an assistant psychologist position, and then a higher assistant psychologist position. I think similarly to what Helen had shared earlier, I also found myself in a position to not be able to afford to complete a master's during that time, and just felt that it wasn't fair to kind of rely on my family throughout that time. So I guess one of the reasons why I was interested in Lancaster was because having a master's isn't, a particular requirement of the course, and I really valued that. It took quite a while as well. So I got onto the course on my 5th time of applying over 6 years, but it was the first time that I'd ever applied to Lancaster, because I'd always tended to look at courses that were kind of geographically closer to where I was living at the time. And I think the year that I got on in Lancaster was the year that I really kind of spent some time and looked at the different courses and really tried to figure out which course I valued the most and which felt like it would fit with me and my experiences, rather than just that kind of geographical zone. And I think similarly to what Gemma said, I think from the very first communication that I received from Rob, the Lancaster course felt very different. The year that I got on, I had interviews at 3 different courses, and Lancaster really stood out right from the get-go of making me feel like a person rather than you know, just a number or an applicant, and everything felt so focused on who you were as a person, what you could bring to training, and that, you know, you didn't have to come and have all of the answers, because you were going to be taught and you were going to learn those things whilst you were on the course. And it was about, you know, what you could bring as a person to that. And I really valued that experience throughout. And it really made me feel like Lancaster was the place for me. And I think we've had some conversations kind of with Rob with a project that we completed throughout the course as well, about how important it is to find the course that feels right for you, and where the values are going to support you in the best way possible. And I think I would definitely recommend kind of really taking the time to kind of look into that when you're looking at where to apply. But certainly, you know, my experience of Lancaster so far has been absolutely fantastic, and I've felt really well supported, and I've felt like I have the space to maybe, which I think is really important throughout this training. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Hannah. That's lovely to hear as well. Yeah, I wish I could share. I think as a tutor, I get a sense of, we probably all do, a sense of what experience people come with and the range that people bring, I think, to the programme, and how much that's valued. There really isn't kind of one way in. There's lots of different experiences that people can bring that are really helpful. Yeah, thank you. Okay, I think Claire and Marissa are going to talk a little bit about the part-time route now.
Yep.
Thanks,
Stacey. Marissa, you're here, aren't you?
I am, yeah.
Brilliant. Hiya. So yeah, we thought this might be better as a bit of a conversation. So not that I'm going to interview you, Marissa, but I've just got we've agreed a few questions. So just to keep us to time, really. So yeah, I guess thinking a little bit about your path to clinical psychology training. Do you want to say a little bit about that and why you chose the part-time route?
Yeah, so my undergrad was almost 20 years ago. When I graduated, I got a 2-2 and was kind of basically told, well, that's the end of anything psychology related. My socioeconomic background meant that I didn't know anyone else who'd been to uni, so I kind of took that as like, okay, I'll carry on. So then I just worked for a number of years in different roles. I worked in a secure service where I did meet a clinical psychologist. By this point, I'd had 2 children, so any hopes of doing anything kind of full-time were off the cards. And she told me about Lancaster, one, accepting people who've got 2-2s, which had been a thing for a while, and then as well that they were doing a part-time route. It hadn't started at the time when she told me about it. She knew it was on the cards. But then when it came out, I applied a couple of times and then I got on the part-time route, and it kind of just fits now, because I couldn't have done the full-time route with my life. It is chaos.
Thank you. And what is it like doing things like longer placements, for example? So spending sort of a good 12, 13 months in a service 2 days a week compared to 3 days a week, 9 months?
I think I've not really experienced the 13 months in one setting, because on my first placement, I did half working from home and then half kind of in the placement, and it was a integrated service, so I was across 2 different places. And then on my second, my indirect placement, I've done 2 separate placements because one of my supervisors went off. But one of the things that I've noticed that is different is the 2 days a week. So if in my first year, it was kind of a thing, because my 2 days were, I think it was Monday or Tuesday and Wednesday. So it means that if your work isn't done in the first 2 days, you've got near enough a week before you're going back into placement. So it then meant that you had to be extra kind of organised. And when I got on the course, I found out that I was dyslexic, so organisation isn't my strong point. So it meant that I really had to dial down and know what I was doing, what I was scheduling, trying to do things at certain times. What the benefit of 13 months is, I've noticed, is you get to do a wider range of things. So when I started my indirect placement, we had a plan to do most direct work in the first few months and then move on to doing indirect work later on. So it does have its benefits that you've got a longer time there, and I felt like I was leaving like a really good team, because I'd been there so long, even though it's 2 days a week. I felt like, yeah, I'd been part of the team for a long time.
Brilliant, thank you. And what about what's it like being part of more than one cohort? Because obviously you'll have moved around, won't you? Because you're in your your original cohort graduated last year, didn't they?
Yeah, they did this year. Yeah. It's strange because part-timers, there was 4 of us when we started, so we were quite lucky that there was a few of us, and we're all parents, we all have similar interests. So like Jen was saying before, the Friends for Life thing, I feel like we have our own little cohort of the 4 of us, and then there's a couple of other people who've joined our part-time cohort who are on bespoke packages. But I think we joined with 2021, and I've spent most of our teaching time with them. We're kind of out of sync with placements and things, but we stuck with them throughout until they graduated. So we kind of chose to stay with them for all of the teaching. So we've done most of our teaching with that cohort, and it has been very strange to see them leave. And for us, it kind of feels like, oh my God, we've got like another year before we can see like the ending. But it's also been nice to kind of transition into the 2022 cohort now, because we're going to be joining them for leadership and research. So it's quite nice that we've got a few different cohorts that we're going between. But it's also strange that 2 cohorts will have qualified before we finish. So it does, in that sense, it's nice that we've seen other people graduate, but we're still feeling like, hi, don't forget about us. We're kind of left in the background, but it works for me. So
and it's nice, like you say, that there's the 4 of you together. And we try and make sure that you stay connected at the times when you're less affiliated with a particular cohort, don't we? Because that's really important.
And it's been nice as well, because like at the certain points we're very busy on the course, and we know when it's coming because the full-timers have already done it. So we're like, oh, we know when this comes, this is coming, and we can like reach out to our cohort and be like, what helps you with this, or what helps you with that? And that's the nice thing as well.
And seeing I guess your peers that you started with get to the end of their journey is a positive thing as well, isn't it? You've got evidence that it happens, people get there. Which is good.
It does.
Is there anything that you've found more difficult with being part-time than you expected, or compared to your full-time peers, do you think?
I think one of the burdens is the kind of organising things, because we've got a longer time on the course. So our research teaching sits with a different cohort than our the rest of the teaching, our clinical teaching. So sometimes we might have missed one teaching to go back to another. So there's a bit of an admin burden around kind of making a note of what you've missed and coming back to it in different years, tallying up if you're in the right amount of time for your studying, for your placements, for teaching. And then sometimes we do get missed on emails because we're here, there and everywhere, and because we've chosen to stay with the 2021 cohort, we've had to chase a couple of things. So it's meant that that's been a bit of a if one of us hasn't flagged it, we kind of don't know where we're at with that. So it's sometimes we had to chase different things, and we of course are very responsive and do try and make it equitable, but it's just that initial, or we've not had this email, should we have had this email, that makes it a little bit more difficult to sometimes manage that. With being on a part-time course, there's often a reason we're on the part-time course, whether it be health, life, or families, or other care and responsibilities, and having that extra burden sometimes is a little bit difficult.
Yeah, of course, and I think you were the second official year, weren't you, to do it? So we were very much in the learning stages, I think, and I think we're sort of getting feedback and nailing things down that we know have needed to get better. And finally, is there anything that you would particularly recommend around the part-time route, or what's been good about it for you?
I think it kind of works with my life. My life is very busy outside of the course, not just children. I look after other people in my family as well. So having the opportunity to do it over less days, but over a longer period of time is really beneficial. I could not have done this full time. There is no way that I could have done this full time and bring up my kids and give them what I wanted to give them in terms of the life. It just wouldn't work for me. So I think this was my option, and I'm glad that it's here.
Thanks, Marissa. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that, because I think it's probably much less sort of known and talked about, the part-time pathway. So it's really helpful to hear your experiences and some of the good things and the difficulties about it as well. So thank you. Okay, right, we're going to hand over to Karen and Patricia, who are two members of Lupin, which is our public involvement network. They're going to talk a little bit about what qualities they would look for in a clinical psychologist. I don't know if who wants to go first. Karen, I think you were first on my list, but I don't know if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Brilliant, thank you.
I'm going to have to read this, I'm afraid, otherwise I'm going to leave out half of what I put. So obviously these are my opinions because I'm a service user. The first one I've got is not be judgmental, because if someone's judged from the minute they enter the room, you get preconceived ideas of their ability to understand the concepts and their willingness to try and put in the hard work, even if their genuine levels of distress will influence what happens in the room and in any care or recommendations that follow that. My second one was treating everyone as an equal, as a person, and as a unique individual, because even clients with similar diagnoses and histories are individual and need to be understood holistically, and their care tailored to their unique circumstance. Then I've got willingness to explore the client's circumstances and the external influencing factors, not just the presenting mental health issue. And that means recognizing that whoever made the referral may only have had time to give you a snapshot of what's going on. So with the willingness to take the time to understand. Again, a genuine interest in people. Clinical psychologists might be observing our body language, but we're also hypersensitive to yours. And the sigh, the eye roll, the slump of boredom will very soon result in us stopping sharing with you or masking to pretend that we're feeling better. Kindness, absolutely key. But people say, well, of course, people wanting to help people will be kind. And for the most part, that's true. But I'm an ex-teacher, and I used to come across teachers who hated children. And there are people in caring professions who don't care and who aren't kind. But it's so important. And sometimes we do understand that burnout and tiredness can affect your empathy. But a lack of kindness or a perceived lack of kindness will affect your client's self-view and their view of their own worthiness. Excellent active listening skills, obviously, and it is a real skill to listen for content, but it's vital to understanding what's going on and what's important, and also for risk. Do you actually listen, or do you start listening and then retreat into your thoughts of immediate, what's wrong with this person? How can I fix them? And your own perceptions. A willingness to be wrong, to change your mind, entertain other possibilities and try different things. Openness is important. It doesn't matter if you realize you might have gone down the wrong path. What does matter is if you stick with it rather than say, perhaps we need to look at something else or try a different tack. Being personable, I think to a certain extent, you can learn to be personable, but obviously somebody who comes across as closed or aloof or superior will be very difficult for people to open up to. And lastly, I've got congruent, but carefully, and not in a my trauma is worse than yours and look where I am type way. It does often help when you can share a little, because it helps with feelings of inferiority and shame, and it builds trusts and it aids the relationship. But it only works if you're comfortable with it and absolutely not in detail. And it doesn't need to be anything major. Can be just a question of, well, when I've been in stressful situations in the past, I sometimes find I get these physical symptoms. Does that happen for you? It doesn't need to be anything detailed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. That's amazing. And just you managed to kind of cover so much there that's going to be really helpful for people to hear. So thank you for sharing your thoughts and your experiences. That's brilliant. Okay, Patricia, going to invite you next, if that's okay. Patricia, are you there? You might be on mute, I think. Sorry.
Sorry, I totally forgot about the mic.
That's okay. No, don't worry.
Okay,
I was just searching through the list to see if you were in the meeting. Go for it when you're ready.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Patricia Jamal, and I'll tell you a little bit about my background first. I'm an academic librarian with over 25 years experience in libraries in 3 different countries. But I was not lucky when I came to the UK in 2020, so I couldn't find work as a librarian. But I was lucky enough to start as a public advisor with ARC NWC, which is Applied Research Collaboration of the Northwest Coast. So since October 2021, I've been doing this, and I've only joined Lupin at Lancaster University in a public involvement capacity earlier this year. When I was thinking and pondering on what to say about the qualities I think a clinical psychologist should be armed with to be able to help somebody in need, a lot of words came to my mind, and they were, the obvious ones, such as being empathetic, to be a great listener, effective communicator, ethical, has integrity, trustworthy, caring, non-judgmental, patient, approachable, sensitive and understanding, open-minded, and the list can go on and on and on. But I'll tell you a little bit about my encounters with clinical psychologists over the years for various reasons. One of them that comes to my mind and definitely made a difference was a psychologist in Abu Dhabi that I used to go to, who made me feel I was the only one that mattered during my session with him. He listened patiently and with great empathy. He was very engaging and encouraging, even refusing to answer the phone or his office door while I was there. And even on my way out, he never made me feel rushed or anything like that. Last year, I had to ask for support from an experienced clinical psychologist for my teenage son. She used to be actually a Lancaster University clinical psychology professor at the university, but now she lives overseas. After a few sessions with both myself and my son, and also with him alone, she actually came to the conclusion that he's better off with a male figure and someone who's seeing him face to face. So her telling me that, I actually found this to be a genuine act of honesty and integrity, which I really appreciated, and I thought this is very important as a criteria for a clinical psychologist, because she could have easily gone along with the sessions, which I was paying a lot of money for, but she didn't when she realized it wasn't really making any difference with him. So far, since the beginning of the year, I've attended 2 Lupin orientation days at the university, in which both students and Lupin members informally get to know each other, and we talk about our lived experiences. So on both occasions and with every group, I start by telling the group where I'm originally from, which is I'm a Palestinian from Lebanon, and the war experience that shaped my childhood. I was really disappointed somehow to notice that in every single group for these 2 events, so I had 8 groups in all with around 4 to 5 students in each group, I thought it was a bit strange that none of the students questioned me further or showed any interest at a time when my people are experiencing a horrible genocide. And actually, only one student opened the subject with me, and interestingly enough, her family are originally not British. What I'm trying to say here is that cultural sensitivity, or should I say the topic of basic human rights, were to my surprise dismissed by an entire group of students, of entire group of people, which one would expect would be the first to show empathy and curiosity to question me further about my experience of living a 15-year war throughout my childhood, and especially with the current affairs and events that are shaping the region I'm from. I was really intrigued by this, so I started to look online to see how much of this type of quality is emphasized as needed criteria for a clinical psychologist. And to my surprise, some publications I looked at and on websites such as the British Psychological Society, there was nothing that jumped up to me regarding this matter. So I feel that especially in a multicultural British society that encourages and welcomes diversity, I would really strongly recommend emphasizing this quality along the many others I mentioned at the start of my talk. And I would add the ones that Karen also mentioned. My advice to you is don't be afraid to question and learn and to step out of your comfort zone onto uncharted territories to understand the person you are meant to help and support fully. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Patricia. I think that's some really helpful advice, I think, for all of us on things that we could improve, but definitely things that are important for applicants to hear if they're interested in our programme as well. So yeah, thank you very much. I'm aware of time, so it goes very fast, doesn't it, when we're in these meetings? We've got sort of 15 minutes left. Firstly, I guess thank you to everyone who's spoken this afternoon. There's a lot that's been shared in terms of people's different qualities and routes into training, and it's been really helpful to hear from Karen and Patricia about, I guess, what kind of qualities and values we might wish to see in candidates applying to clinical psychology as well. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone. I guess now is the time, if you're here as an applicant and you're thinking about applying to the programme, if you've got particular questions, either pop them in the chat or raise your hand and we'll try and find someone who, hopefully within this group, we'll have someone who knows the answers and we'll try and sort of answer things for you. Just give you a few minutes because I know it can be really, really difficult to hear everything. Oh yes, one hand up, go for it. I think you might be muted. Is it Ganul?
Hi, yes.
Hi.
Sorry, I wasn't sure you were
No,
referring
that's
to
okay.
me.
Sorry, I wasn't clear. Go for it.
I don't know much about this deductive reasoning test. Would you able to expand that a bit, please?
Rob, are you okay to answer that one?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't want to just say read our website, but that's going to be the ultimate answer I'm going to give you, because there's a load of pictures on our website that go through the different types of questions it asks. They are ways of making you think about a set of data and reinterpreting it in the way that we all do in life, really. So a good example would be you're trying to arrange a meeting with 4 or 5 people. They all have different meetings already scheduled in, and you need to find a place where you could have a meeting with them. And you need to figure that out in your head and put into the website where that meeting would be. As I say, our website does have not only an example of each of the different sorts of questions that are in that test, it's also got a link through to the provider of the test called SHL, so you can go and do a test on it. So it won't give you an idea of how you will actually do in a live test, but it'll give you a feel for how the questions work, how the interface works. It'll probably feel really, really difficult because, as I said, it is really, really difficult for everybody. But yeah, don't be put off by it, feeling tough. That's, I guess, the important thing. But yeah, go have a look at our website. Everything about our process is on our website. We don't hide anything. There's nothing scary about it. There's nothing hidden. There's no agenda there. We're as open as we can be about everything we do. Does that help? I'll go with yes.
Thanks, Rob. It's really difficult with microphones and technology, isn't it? Okay,
yeah, I'll drop a link to the page with all that information into the chat as well.
That's brilliant, thank you. Any final tips? I don't know, has anybody got anything they want to share? I wonder if the trainees might be good for answering this one. Anything that sort of helped you in the interview process?
I feel like the process of applying and going through interviews, I think the most difficult part for me was the time. Like, you know, you apply in like November, then you've got your deductive reasoning test in like February, and then you've got your interviews. And I think for me, that was like the hardest thing. And I think like you automatically want to say something really cheesy, like look after yourself, self-care and things like that. But it is really important, but also to recognise if you're not offered a place on the course, it's not because you're not good enough. You know, it's not a reflection on you as a person. It's a reflection of there are so many people wanting to apply for clinical psychology. So just keep trying, just keep trying, just yeah, if that's something that you really want to work towards, then just go for it. And I think you said it, Hannah, about, you know, thinking about which course would connect closely to your values, and you know, because you will find your tribe when you find the right one. So just persist and persevere, and yeah.
Thanks, Jem, that's really helpful. Any of other trainees got any tips or advice? No problem if not.
Just say never too old as well. Sorry, go on. I was just going to say,
oh, sorry, you go.
I was just going to say I'm 40, and I thought when I got told about the part-time route that, oh my God, I'm going to be 40 when I'm doing the doctorate. Everyone's going to be 20s. But to be fair, I'm going to be 40 anyway, so I may as well be 40 and doing a career that I like. So yeah, there's no upper age limit of when you can become a clinical psychologist.
Thanks, Marissa. Hannah?
I think I just really reflect on the fact that I think applying to Lancaster and people were saying, you know, just be yourself and come to the interview and, you know, just show who you are. And I guess some of the communication that we received was that, you know, it's okay if you don't use clinical and you're kind of drawing on just everyday life and things that have happened. And actually, I think that really was the case within the interview, and having been on interview panels as well, you know, there can be so much value in that as well. So I would certainly say, you know, don't shy away from using some of those examples within this interview process as well. And it really is as simple as they make it seem. You know, they really do just want to know who you are. So yeah, I'll just share that.
Thanks, Hannah, that's really helpful.
Yeah, that really nicely sort of melds into the question from Ruth asking about, is it worth getting years experience even though we don't need it? And I think lots of us here at Lancaster would say it's really valuable getting years life experience, but doesn't need to be in a clinical role. Yeah, it's about being out there and experiencing human beings. It doesn't matter how you come and tell us about that. But yeah, life experience is important, and reflecting on it is how you get a good place.
Thanks, Rob. There's a question in the chat. So any advice about the role play section of the interview? Yeah, which was approached with a kind of a practical problem solving hat on. yeah, anybody want to have a think about that one?
I guess I'd kind of say try and see it not as a role play. So although it is kind of, it's set up and it's staged and things like that, I'd probably recommend, trying not to kind of overthink it. I find that I can get quite nervous if I think, right, I'm doing a role play. So I try to kind of see it as how would I manage this in if I was in this situation in real life. So I tried to kind of step away from the thought that this is a role play. And again, just try and be yourself, try and just respond in the way that you would if that was in like a workplace setting.
Thanks, Jem. That's really helpful. Okay, do we have any other thoughts on that or any final questions from anyone? So there's one that's come up here. Has it been difficult to maintain a good work-life balance? So yeah, I'll hand over to the trainees again for that one, if that's okay.
I would say that one of the best pieces of advice that I was ever given before starting the course was to really use your study days well and to organize them and think in advance about kind of what it is that you're going to do on those days. And I would say from my perspective, I feel like I have been able to maintain that balance quite well. It's very rare that I've had to do any work sort of outside the 9 to 5 over weekends and evenings. And any time it has been has just been around kind of a deadline. But most of the time, by using those study days well, it is enough time to sort of get what you need to do done. I've still been able to volunteer with, a service that I was working with kind of before starting the course, and still have time to do everything that I enjoy and everything I've wanted to do. So I think it is possible, but there are times where, it may inevitably be a little bit more busy.
I would kind of just say as well, I think the course really supports that work-life balance. So before I came onto the course, I really struggled with overworking. So in my like CAMS role, I would work additional hours and I would start early, finish late. And I think I expected that to just be like the norm. But definitely since starting the course, my clinical tutor has very much been around, are you booking in your annual leave? Okay, so if you're working outside of your hours, then we need to look at that. Why is it you're working outside of your hours? And so I actually find that my work-life balance has improved since being on the course. And it's actually been one of my kind of goals that was set right at the start, and I've definitely been well supported with that. There's no expectation that you're going to run yourself into the ground to finish the course.
Thanks, Jem. That's really helpful. It's good to hear. Okay, we've probably got time for one more question, I think, if anyone's got a final one that you either want to put in the chat or pop your hand up. Okay. Right, well, if there aren't any more questions, then we will leave it there for today. But I just want to say thank you again to everyone who's joined us and listened and come to hear about the Lancaster programme. We really hope, I guess, that this is the start of your journey and that you'll consider applying to us, and that you'll get in touch with us, I guess, if you've got further questions after today as well, because it can be a bit overwhelming, a lot of information in a very short space of time, I think, whenever we do these events. There's loads of information on our website. So do have a look there. Do have a look at the handbook and just get in touch with us if there's anything else that you need to know. I think we'd always rather people ask the questions before applying, so that you've got a clear sense of kind of where you're coming to and how we do things here. So yeah, Rob's just really helpfully put the admissions email address into the chat. And I know a few people have shared their personal email addresses as well. I'm happy to put mine in the chat as well. So if anybody's got anything that you do want to know, just email any of us and we'll find the right person to respond. But yes, thank you so much to everyone who's given the time this afternoon to all of the speakers as well, because I think it's always really helpful to hear just the range of experiences that people bring to clinical training. And also Karen and Patricia, thank you for sharing your experiences of kind of working with psychologists as well, and what you'd look for, because I think all of the values and the qualities that you talked about are really important things for the applicants to hold in mind, and all of us. So yes. Okay, thank you so much, everyone, and please get in touch soon. Okay.